the Biden administration has officially launched the student loan forgiveness application. Individuals with student loans who made less than $125,000 a year in 2020 or 2021 can apply for up to $10,000 of debt relief, or as much as $20,000 for eligible borrowers who were also Pell Grant recipients. Let's hear what President Biden had to say in his remarks on the loan relief program yesterday.
Today marks a big step among others that my administration is taking to make education a ticket to the middle class that folks can actually afford. My commitment was, if elected president, I was going to make government work to deliver for the people. This rollout keeps that commitment, just as I'm keeping my commitment to relieve student debt as borrowers recover from this economic crisis caused by the once-in-a-lifetime pandemic.
While the debt relief plan is moving ahead, at least 5 conservative lawsuits have been filed that could pose a challenge if they are successful. According to Yahoo News, borrowers are waiting for a decision from a federal judge who heard 6 Republican-led states last week that claim debt relief will harm their state's tax revenue. President Biden defended his student debt relief plan from Republicans in his remarks yesterday.
Republican members of Congress and Republican governors are trying to do everything they can to deny this relief, even to their own constituents. As soon as I announced my administration's student debt plan, they started attacking it, saying all kinds of things. Their outrage is wrong and it's hypocritical. I will never apologize for helping working Americans and middle-class people as they recover from the pandemic, especially not the same Republicans who voted for a $2 trillion tax cut in the last administration, mainly benefited the wealthiest Americans and the largest corporations, and didn't pay for a penny of it. It racked up a deficit. I don't want to hear from Republican officials again who had hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars in pandemic relief loans, the PPP loans, but who now attack the working middle-class Americans who are getting relief.
So Biden hitting that PPP messaging that was so effective for him back in August really hard again. I think it's important just off the top to note that this application was just in beta mode until yesterday. And even then, 8 million people immediately signed up for it. Only about 43 million are eligible total. So that was a huge chunk of folks who immediately went and successfully used the website without having any of those problems that existed with the ACA website. And for folks who might be hesitating, who think it might be something they have to sit down and fill out, like those horrible FAFSA forms we had to fill out on our way to college. It's something that takes less than a minute to do. It's basically name, social security number, and ticking a box that says I made less than this amount in 2020 or 2021, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, I'm glad the government finally figured out how to make a website. Wow, they mastered that skill in the year 2022. So there are several lawsuits. Yeah. I talked about one of them last week, and then or 2 weeks ago maybe, and that one was ultimately the judge didn't buy that one. I think in part because then the Biden administration just said, well, wait, this is all moot because we're not, this isn't going to apply to you don't have to take it.
Yeah, you can opt out.
Yes.
And to be clear, I spoke to a couple of student debt experts from the Debt Collective, which is, the biggest debtors union in the country and who's been really pushing for a lot of this stuff, for an episode that will be coming out on my podcast on Thursday. And what they were saying is that there was never an explicit commitment to there not being an opt-out. There was kind of this presumption that you couldn't opt out. And so the lawsuit was really just premature in that way. Other lawsuits have struggled to to resolve the standing issue.
Yeah. Well, and that's what this lawsuit was trying to do.
Yeah.
They're all trying to find creative ways to resolve the standing issue. But look, I think you're very supportive of this policy. The fact that this, is being done via executive order, rather than legislation was not crafted and was not debated and discussed and put together that explains exactly what's being done. It's kind of being made up on the fly. It's just being declared, which is what's going to open it up to these challenges. They go, well, okay, wait, now it's voluntary. You don't have to do it anymore. So that lawsuit is thrown out.
Well, to be clear, there is legislation. There's a legislative hook for the executive authority. President can't just move a magic wand and do whatever they want. So
it's a weak legislative hook.
Well, there's 2 legislative hooks that have been put out there. I was critical in a radar before about the emphasis on the HEROES Act, which was a post-9/11 emergency act that was geared toward victims of 9/11 first responders, et cetera, having their student loans postponed in the context of that crisis. But again, when I spoke to the Asher Taylor and Sparky Abraham, Abraham for this upcoming episode, they made it clear that all of these lawsuits, the government has been drawing on both the Authority of the Heroes Act and the 1965 Higher Education Act dually, which I think will cut off a lot of the other criticisms that have been raised in this Jed Sugarman article. He's a Fordham law professor, and some other sources right off at the pass. So, but they are encouraging folks to go ahead and apply, because to the extent that there is any kind of successful legal action that causes any kind of injunction or something like that down the road, the fact of people having already been reimbursed will make it very difficult for them to claw back.
That was going to be my question to you. You're the attorney. If so much of the money is already paid out, I can't imagine that gets taken away or paid back, even if there would be a successful law. I mean, that seems very prohibitively difficult to convince some kind of judge, or a judge is going to be less willing to hear an argument that if the implication is going to be that money gets back, I can't imagine that happening.
And
maybe they stop the program and no more people get money.
And this is why I think there's a lot of neoliberal, corporate opposition to certain kind of social welfare programs coming into effect, because folks know that once they start getting something, it's hard to curb it back. That's why you have bipartisan supportive programs like Social Security, and why I think conservatives in both parties are very weary of demonstrating in this moment that the government can actually help people in these very straightforward ways. So they are encouraging folks. There's a final deadline for the end of next year. But if you want to get your loans forgiven before repayments start on January 1st, there's an earlier deadline, I think, of November 15th to fill out the form by. And again, the form is very, very easy to fill out.
I would, in my ideal world, we'll just not do this, but in my other ideal world, the standing issue should be, I know this is wrong, I know the Supreme Court does not allow this, but the standing issue should be resolved by it's your tax dollars, so anyone can be able to sue. But I know this is very much not something the Supreme Court has.
That would mean that
agreed.
Standing as a concept would be completely gone.
Yes, I would.
Because I would be able to sue over every war. I'd be able to sue over.
Wouldn't that be great?
Legislation. Well, no, not necessarily.
Why are we harmed by being able to sue over every war?
I mean, the idea is that we have a legislative. First of all, they're not supposed to be going to war already without congressional consent. So there's a lot of problems with executive authority that have been extended. But generally speaking, our legal system would have to be dramatically redesigned. I think it needs to be dramatically redesigned anyway. But I really do think that people should consider what this means. I think the PPP point stands. The government had no issue doing what it frequently does, which is to give out sums of corporate welfare to elites constantly. This is one instance where, to be clear, 43 million borrowers are eligible, 20 million under this program, which is not going far enough, but 20 million will have their debt erased entirely. This is a huge win ostensibly for the Biden administration. We'll see if it has an effect in places like Georgia.
On voters.
On voters, yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
More Rising after this. Stay tuned.